My name's Andrew Day. I'm the chairman and a director at Gifted Philanthropy, and today we're going to embark on the second of our webinars on asking for the money. This time, we're talking about the 5 steps to successfully asking. For those who joined us a week ago, gosh, that week passed very quickly, but we had the first session of getting ready to ask. And please do visit our website at giftedphilanthropy.com. And if you go to the resources tab, you can, if you haven't didn't attend last week, you can easily replay the webinar, which has been recorded and posted up on our website for you. That's getting ready to ask, and the date was the 10th of June. But today we're talking about the business end of this, really, about asking and how you those key 5 steps to prepare to actually successfully complete an ask. It's not just about getting a gift, it's getting the gift you want. I should just mention again, Amy, for those who weren't with us last week, that this is a subject that is considered to be amongst the most scary you can ask anybody to do. In fact, the Times newspaper, as I said last week, ran a survey some years back asking people in Britain what were the scariest things you could ask them what to do in their life. And the number one thing on the list was asking someone they know for a gift for charity. They'd rather run down their high streets naked, bungee jump off, I don't know, abseil down the church tower, do absolutely anything but ask someone they know for money. And that's obviously rooted in some underlying anxieties about the sense that they feel like they're begging, etc. And that's really what we're going to discuss and address today in this particular session.
I think we sometimes take it for
So,
granted.
Amy, let's have a look at the next slide, because you're driving, not me. This.
There we go.
So we've got a book, haven't we, Amy, which we've published called Gifted Asking. Here's a copy of the front cover. And anyone who's interested, having listened to today's session, you can simply email us to ask for your free complimentary copy of Gifted Asking. It's quite pithy, but a handy aid memoir. And the details will be coming up at the end of today's session. So, as you recall from last week, hopefully, the distinction between a donation and a gift, and really what we're about in this process of learning how to ask properly and effectively, is transforming donations into gifts. Donations being, as you can see here, a response that's very much reactive. It's given often due to some pressures of guilt or feeling in a sense like an obligation in that way. And it's often the change in your pocket. You know, when someone approaches you in the street and they're seeking some support, then if you still have change in your pocket, that's very much a donation, and is the response. Whereas a gift is something more thoughtful. It's done. It's very much a willing a process. It's a process. If you reflect on when you purchase a birthday gift or a Christmas gift, you take the time to think about what's the right sort of gift. You wrap that gift. You may write a card, and you think about when and where you might actually present it to the person you're giving that gift to. So it's considered. It's got imbued with sort of strong personal feelings, a real belief in the cause if you're making a gift to a charity. And it's usually of a higher value because of that degree of consideration. So they're just to remind you the distinction between a donation and a gift. And this process is very much around cultivating and seeking out gifts rather than donations. Right, the motivations for giving we covered off last time, Amy. You'll know Chris and I. Here they are. The number one on the list. I won't read through all of them, but the number one reason why people give is because they're asked to give. But we have all sorts of reasons for giving. It can be just genuinely altruism, and that still happens. Hallelujah for that. And usually that's the main reason. It can be because of reciprocity. If you make a gift, then if you ask someone to make a gift, then they may turn around and ask you to make a gift.
Well, how many times do we see that as well, Andrew? Where people say, well, I know he got me for his cause last week, so you can give it to this one. We see it quite a lot, don't we?
We definitely do. But there's habit too. There are people that give out of habit. It's part of their life and their financial plan, a real sense of duty, and that's very much tied to the next point about we're very around religious tenets and reasons for giving are very much tithe giving for Christians and so on. It's part and parcel of the faith, and it can also be because of political imperatives and interest, and equally so, not just big P political, but where there's an issues-based focus, animal welfare, all these sorts of things can motivate people to make significant gifts. Sometimes too, it can be around self-advancement, recognition. We've seen that, haven't we, Amy?
Absolutely. And let's
Yeah.
face it, if somebody wants naming and they're going to part with their cash, then so long as they fit the due diligence policy, it's all good.
Yeah. And I've got to say, I still can't get over because we're dealing a lot at the moment with our American colleagues, but some of their recognition schemes are amazing, massive
Yeah.
slabs of granite with names chiseled in. I think we're a little more subtle here, but not necessarily. Anyway, but also it can be an in memoriam. It can be about recognizing, not just your family, but it can also be about recognizing a great teacher that they've had that might want to name a classroom or that, it's a moment in history, and in memoriam giving is something to bear in mind. But as I said at the outset, it's usually the main motivation for giving is because they've been asked personally by someone they respect, who's asked them to do something very specific to it, and to join them in achieving, an interesting and challenging vision. But it's worth taking the time when you get the book, have a look at the motivations. And the real basis here, Amy, isn't it, is that before you go about approaching anybody, put yourself in their shoes. Think through what is motivating them or might motivate them to make a gift to your charity at this time.
Okay. So then we come to the actual asking itself. So how do we successfully ask people for money? And whether that is you yourself for doing the asking as maybe a trustee, a governor, leader of an organization, or from the development office, and you're either asking yourself or you're supporting your leadership to ask. It's the same process all the way through. So we've got the 5 steps. First of all, the planning, and then inspiring the potential giver, inviting questions, critically making that ask for the gift, and then closing and securing that commitment. So we're going to go through these steps in some detail. So first of all, the planning. Super, super important part of the process.
Yeah.
And we really need to make sure we've done our research. So at the start of the process, obviously you'll have done all the prospect evaluation, and I think you covered that in the last webinar, didn't you?
We did. We actually spent quite a bit of time in the getting ready to ask webinar a week ago on how you'd go about ranking and rating your prospects and the 4 indices that you look at in trying to determine if they're ready to be asked, basically.
Fantastic. So you know what stage your prospect is at, and you know when they're ready to move forward and start the asking process. We quite often then prepare a prospect profile, particularly if you are in the development office and you're supporting some of your leadership in asking, sorry. So looking at what's the background, what's likely to inspire them, what's likely to motivate them, how much you're going to ask for, etc., etc. So before asking, the first thing to think about is, have you made your own gift? If you are, a member of the leadership team, we always say, how can you ask others to do what you're not prepared to do yourself?
Well, and another way of looking at that is if you can't convince yourself to give, how on earth are you going to convince anybody else to do that?
Indeed. And it
Yeah.
can be a challenge. Lots of people say, well, I give my time, and of course, hugely valuable. But more and more, not just with face-to-face personal asking, but particularly with grant makers as well, having the leadership say, collectively, we've given X amount is critical. And it's not about, people compromising themselves. It's about people giving what they can.
Mm.
Super, super important. So first step, think about your own gift. Then think about compiling your prospect list. So who might you be ready to ask for money? Really important that you consult with colleagues in the development office. We don't want any double dipping. That's embarrassing for everyone concerned. And compile that list of people who you want to approach. Who needs cultivation? So do some of these prospects need to come to an information event? Do they need a site visit? Do they need a meeting, or are they ready to be asked? So we'll look at what stage everyone's at there and what additional support might be needed.
There, Amy, just going back, that prospect and evaluation process, remember one of the 4 categories is interest. And
Yeah.
if your particular prospect is scoring low on interest, then the really what you need to do is spend that time cultivating them, getting them in, sharing information with them, developing the relationship before you get to the point of asking. Um, and I should just the other point, just if I come back on compiling your prospect list, if you don't get it checked out, you won't know as well whether your prospect has already given or worse still has said no. You don't so you don't want them on your list either in either case. Or if you're going to approach a giver to give again, then at least go in and the first thing you say is say thank you. So having your own list is and getting that properly checked out and is really important. So just to comment on that.
Absolutely vital. And then think about who you're going to ask first. So we normally say, particularly if people are nervous about asking, ask
Mm,
the person who you think is most likely to say yes, not the one who's necessarily going to give you the most money.
so true.
It builds that confidence for both you and the team. You get to understand the process and almost have an easier test run
Mm,
to get that first gift under your belt.
mm,
Um, Obviously, set the date. Really important to agree a date and a time and a place with
mhm.
your chosen prospect. Let's not do this in the supermarket, at a dinner party, on the golf course. It needs to be in a specific environment where you can talk openly about the project and what they might want to what they might want to do.
Mm.
And let the development office know. So consult with colleagues and so everyone knows when an ask is taking place. And again, just to ensure those communications, they don't then receive a mailer for something the next day when you've already been to ask them for something and they feel like they're being bombarded.
Yeah,
So
good point.
planning, first step.
Yeah.
Move
And
on, Andrew, to inspiring the giver.
okay, well, this is you need to take time here. This is you can't sort of rush in as eager as you might be to ask. You need to actually take the time to inspire your potential giver. And you need to talk when you're approaching your giver here about why did you make your gift? Tell your story. What were your motivations? What was the process you went through? I mean, for me, it's invariably I need to consult with my wife, and we need to think about it and how we're going to plan it, and we need to talk about which part of the project has really inspired us and that we really want to direct our gift towards, and maybe talk about even other people that have got involved and excited and have taken out a dedicated gift, something they've named, and what motivated them to do that, and how that's all adding to the project. It is a moment in time. And you need to speak positively about the benefits here. It's so easy to sort of default to trying to answer negative questions that haven't actually been asked.
Yeah.
So, play. I'm a cricketer, and as is Chris Goldie, obviously, but play each ball as it is bowled to you. Don't try to second guess what's going on. So just speak positively, speak particularly around the benefits and the impact of the project. It's very easy to talk about a building as a building. It's a big building, it's got so many classrooms, da, da, da. But actually, what are the benefits here? How many lives is this going to touch over what period of time, and what sorts of outcomes are likely to follow from this? Wouldn't it be wonderful if you're talking about a science block for a school? Wouldn't it be wonderful if the school produced its first Nobel Prize winning scientist? And we need these resources if we're ever going to get there. Wow, that's an exciting vision. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Rather than a set of six science labs. So it's about talking the language of opportunity, and please, although the world is a pretty desperate place out there at the moment, let's move beyond the narrative of woe and despair in the process. Now, your team will have done a lot of work producing the case statement and the story in promotional materials. It can be in video clips and on YouTube and elsewhere, but usually it's also in a printed form. So if you're speaking as you should be face to face with your prospect, make sure you use that brochure well. It is, in effect, a script for your ask. It also helps take some of the directness out of it if you place the brochure down between you, possibly on the table, and leaf through it together. And use your pen to point to various pages and tell the story, because funnily enough, people's eye tends to follow the end of the pen, and because you're not directly eyeballing your prospect, you're both looking at the brochure, you'll find it much more comfortable, a much less stressful environment to actually get to the stage where you're ready to talk about money.
And I think different prospects like to see different materials, don't they? So for me, I am all about the shiny artist impressions and smiling people or whatever, that's what would get me. Some people like to see the architect's plans and look at the
Yeah,
exact square footage of a capital project and see what's what. And you'll know based on who you're meeting with what kind of information you might need to take with you,
definitely.
and have the kind of full suite available there to you. And just touching on why did you make your gift as well? So if you, and you kind of briefly mentioned it, Andrew, but if you are a development professional talking on behalf of the organization you work for, use an example of somebody who's already given, who doesn't
Mm,
mind sharing
mm,
their story. So you might say, our chairman made her gift because, she felt she was inspired by XYZ. So you can
mm,
still use examples even if you're not the leader, but you're working from the development side.
mm.
Okay, so moving on to questions. People get terrified of questions, but questions are really, really good. If somebody is asking you questions about the project, it's because they're interested. The worst
Yes.
thing is when you deliver your feel about the project and they say nothing.
That's desperate. You don't want that. And actually, if that happens, what you've got to do then really is you ask them questions
Yes,
to try and get them talking. Because if there isn't a sort of an inquisitive mind here, you're not going to get to the stage of giving. So
absolutely.
true. Yeah.
Absolutely. So that's the next point, really, isn't it? Encourage that dialogue and, have an open conversation. Really, really important. You don't need to know everything about the
No.
project. And that's a main worry for a lot of people. So frequently we'll prepare frequently asked questions. So there's some key questions that we know will crop up, about the project that you're going to be asked. And everyone's then singing to the same hymn sheet and has that agreed response to certain questions. But invariably, you will be asked questions you don't know how to answer. It's happened to all of us. And far better to say, do you know what? I'm not sure, but I'm going to get that answer for you and come back to you because I don't want to tell you the wrong thing rather than fudge something and, then have to go back and say, oh, actually, I was wrong. And, just be open and honest about it. And nobody's going to have any concerns about that.
And that's really useful to actually take the time to write that question down. Okay, so you would like to know and confirm with them what they want to get answered. Explain that you'll endeavor to get an answer to them by the end of the week or by next week or some sort of timeline, so that it demonstrates how important their involvement is and how important it is that they have all their questions answered.
Absolutely. Yeah. Batting it off just makes the whole process seem less important, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
So finally refer to colleagues, in the development office, other leadership colleagues, get the answers to those questions,
Mm,
and move forwards. Obviously, there may be fully questions that you were able to answer on the day, which is also fantastic.
mm. And then the crucial bit, asking for the gift, is actually more about asking them to join you. I think this is not a sales process. Okay, even though it might feel like that at some point, it is very much around an investing process and a team building process might be a better way of looking at it. So a good way to ask for the gift is actually to declare your own gift and talk about your motivations and how things like tax benefits and recognition have come to play. If you remember what I said around the brochure being open between you, there's a natural point in the brochure where you get to the scale of giving, which is the numbers all set out, and we discussed that in the last webinar. And actually using your pen to point at that scale of giving and to tell the story of, you know what, I decided to make a gift. You actually don't even need to say the amount, although it is stronger if you do. You can simply point, that we decided to make a gift at this level, and all I'm doing is pointing to a figure on the scale of giving. I've not said it. And what motivated us to do that was the opportunity to do X, Y, and Z. And I thought this might be something that would interest you, which is why I've taken the time to come and discuss this with you and see what your thoughts are and whether you would like to join us in this fantastic new project. Now, best news is, and I'm rehearsing this in a way, Amy, is you can also point to the other columns on the scale of giving and explain very clearly that if we use the gift aid system, the single biggest check could be coming from HMRC. And we
Yeah.
all know how much joy that's going to bring. So, if we do this in a clever way, then we can make sure that our tax is redirected back to this project. And again, it gives you a chance to show how giving over time adds up. For a 40p taxpayer, they can give £120 a year, £10 a month. But actually, with the gift aid on top of that and the benefit to the charity, over 5 years, that's £1,000, £10 a month net cost to a 40p taxpayer. So you can show that on your scale of giving. And all of a sudden, the price of a gift becomes the cost of, well, these days, almost a pint of beer a month. And it's not so painful actually to give that £1,000 and be part of this historic moment. So taking the time to use that promotional material, use the pen, tell your story by pointing to the key elements on the scale of giving, reminds them of the tax benefits, opportunity to pledge over time, and the recognition that's available for doing that. Then you need to stop talking. You actually really, really need to listen. Okay, and you need to make a conscious point of stopping talking to hear what the response is and really listen, because sometimes they'll tell you something that you hadn't anticipated, like, yeah, I'm in. Has that top gift gone yet? Or,
Yeah.
is it possible to spread this over 2 years instead of, do you see what I mean? And you can stop having to try and convince them. You then are getting down to the details of structuring their gift.
Yeah. It's a really important point, isn't it? That stepping back and letting them then comment on what you've said.
Yeah.
And again, as development professionals, you can go through this process. So I once supported a client with a major gift ask, and the leader of the organization, but he was horrified at the thought of asking this top prospect that we had for money. So I did all the dirty words, let's say, talked about the money, discussed the tax benefits, went through everything. And then at the end of my spiel, I looked at our leader, and all he had to say was, I really need your help. Please, will
Yeah.
you join me? And he delivered his line fantastically. Actually, the donor in that case said, I think you think I've got more money than I have, but I will, I will give you some money. And we did get a gift. So sometimes it's about being a development professional and a fundraiser and supporting your leadership in that way as well, and helping them get over that nerves in those first instance. So it can work in many ways, can't it, Andrew?
Amy, you make a really good point there. Nobody is going to be offended if you think they've got more money than they actually have.
Yeah.
Okay. So it actually works the other way around. People will be offended quite often if they are not asked, because they're considered to be one of the key families in the community or an active, member of that organization, and they're not asked, that they will take offense. If you ask somebody for more money than they think they can afford, but you might help them see the way they could spread their gift over time and use tax benefits to actually be much more generous than they might have thought they could be, you will not create offense
Yeah.
at all. It's a compliment very often. Okay. But as long as you're not telling anybody what to do,
Yeah.
you're demonstrating through your own experience how they can be much more generous, possibly, than they thought they could be.
Absolutely. So finally, really, really important. A lot of people will make the ask and they're so nervous that they go, okay, then great, and leave. Actually, this is probably the most important step of them all, which is
Mm.
clarifying where you're at with that prospect. So, what do you think? How do you feel about this? Is it something you might consider? Clarify that level of interest. 9 times out of 10, they probably want to have further consultation with somebody, whether that be a spouse, a business partner, fellow trustees, a trust, wherever that money might be coming from. And that's absolutely fine. Sometimes we have those great situations where people immediately say, yeah, I know what I want to do, and this is that, and use that gift card then to sign them up. So the gift card is that one pager where you can record their details of their gift, and a gift aid declaration all on one form. You've got that then for monitoring purposes and audit purposes as well for your campaign. So use that gift card to sign up the gift, or if they do need, further consideration, thank them for their time and critically make that next appointment. So when we leave things vague and okay, great, yeah, I'll get back to you, perhaps say, well, could I perhaps call you 2 weeks today then at this time to have a chat about that, to give you time to follow up. Just so we don't have that ambiguity and you're not in that cycle then of chasing somebody for that next meeting. And it can be challenging, can't it, Andrew, to kind of try and lock people down because you don't want to seem pushy, do you? But it's really important, isn't it?
And actually, where you're at greatest risk of damaging a relationship is if you allow ambiguity to persist. You need to, in a way, encourage, well, you need to let the prospect know that the answer to their question, whether they would like to get involved or not, is really important to you and the charity.
Yeah.
And so and you need to give them the opportunity to say no. And I have to say, as said the Australian in the room, Brits find it really hard to say no. They would much rather say maybe and string it out and go on forever. And actually, in your development office, the last thing you want is a whole bunch of prospects on the maybe list that you continually have to find creative ways to chase up and
Yeah.
find, and it just gets more and more excruciating and embarrassing. And you don't want to find a situation where you're having to you see them crossing the road in front of you so they don't talk to you. So the point is, in this particular final step, you need to be really clear that their support and what they want to do, it's important that we get an answer as to what that's going to be. And if it's yes, then let's make sure it's applied in the way they want it to be applied. And using the gift card to sign all those details down to make sure that commitment is really clear. And is absolutely essential. And if it's no, we need to know that as well. And we need to be able to record so they're not going to be asked again and we can manage the relationship appropriately. And if they need to talk to others, well, then, as Amy was saying, let's agree how we can complete the process. So shall I come back and talk to you next week? Will you, and try where possible. My trick for those of you in a professional role here today is to try and retain the initiative yourself. So instead of saying, would you get back to me, after you've spoken to your accountant and leave it open, that's not as good as, may I get in touch with you next Friday to hear how you've gone with your accountant so we can tidy matters up. So you retain the initiative.
Yeah. Absolutely. And, some people will always say no. And that's okay. You will go through this process and have no's, and we all have it as fundraisers. But as you say, Andrew, far better to have a clear no than an ambiguous maybe that you've then got in the system, because you can cross that prospect off, mark them as a no, they're not getting contacted again, and you know exactly what you're working with.
And no, and no means no, Amy. It's not, the American salespeople talk about you've got to say no 5 times before it's no, but that's rubbish. One no is no. And of course, things can change. I mean, it's no for now because their circumstances might change, their commitment to the charity might change. Life rolls on, and by maintaining a friendly and positive relationship, you're keeping that door open to future opportunities.
Absolutely. And regardless of the outcome, always, always thank the prospect.
Yeah,
Even if they said
definitely.
no, they've given you their time, and it's super
Definitely.
important for the reputation of your organization to do so.
So true.
So thinking then about asking in challenging times, and gosh, we've had probably 5 years of challenging times now.
Feels that way.
But we should always be sensitive when we're asking for money. But really do think about, are we asking at the right time for the right thing? And if you've done your planning, those early stages we were talking about, and in the last webinar, the prospect evaluation, the cultivation, then you should be in the right place. But do be sensitive, because there may always be things that we don't know about prospects when we're asking for money.
Yeah.
However, remember, there's been many challenging situations, as we said, but some people and some companies haven't suffered at all. So, not everybody is feeling the pinch. Some people have thrived during, various crises, economic or otherwise.
Amy, we should remember, just for those who aren't across the numbers, the Charities Aid Foundation regularly produces annual giving reports. We're still well over £10 billion given away in Britain every year.
It was 15.4 last year. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is, there is money people give. It's a very important part of our national life, and it's one of the defining characteristics of Britain, in my view, is the
Mm.
strong philanthropic culture. So don't just assume because the world is tough out there that people have stopped giving. That's just not the case.
Well, do you know what? That was bolstered by the local giving report that came out a couple of
Yeah.
weeks ago as well,
Yeah.
where I think it was 6 out of the top 10 wards for giving per head. So not the amount of giving, but the number of people who made a gift.
Mm,
6 of them were in lower income areas,
that's right.
which
That's
is
right. And
fascinating, isn't it?
And actual fact, those on who have the least amount of money tend to be in proportion to the amount that they've got, the
Yeah,
most generous in,
yeah,
even though the wealthy give big lumps of money, proportionately, it's far smaller than those who have the least amount of money. Yeah,
fascinating, isn't it?
interesting.
So even though, you may be nervous about asking in challenging times, do not be tempted to turn to letter writing. That face to face is always the best. Even if doing so virtually, you can still eyeball people and have those open conversations. We say sometimes, a letter can be nothing short of offensive if you're
Yeah,
asking for
yeah.
large sums of money, unless, of course, that's a chosen route for a funder or what have you, of course. But when we're asking individuals and peers for money, we should be doing that face to face.
And
Absolutely.
actually, the studies that have been done here demonstrate that 80% of the time, if you ask face to face, you will get a gift.
Hmm.
8 out of 10 approaches will be a yes, not a no. So
Brilliant.
that's that. Whereas if you write letters, you're lucky if you get 2 to 4 out of 100 that respond, let alone be a yes or a no.
Mhm.
So it's really important to take the time and effort to speak to people face to face. The other point in this is that when you're talking with them about their gift, as we've just done in those 5 steps, around 70% of the time, it's during those conversations they're trying to work out how much to give.
Mm.
So the information you're providing is important to making the decision about the size of the gift, not just whether or not they'll make a gift, cut you a check for £100 or something. So that securing face-to-face meetings is a really important way of securing major gifts.
Absolutely. And when times are tough, people are keen to hear good news. So that
Yes.
brings us back to, that storytelling element and talking about the opportunity of your project or, what it is that you deliver as a charity and the good impact you can have.
Mhm.
People want to hear about nice things when times are tough. So don't be afraid to share the great news about what you're delivering and the impact you're having.
And that can happen. Remember, when we've got the brochure open, we're talking about the scale of giving and we're pointing the pen and you're showing those top 10 gifts. It's a great moment to say, of those top 10 gifts, we've already got three.
Mm.
You don't need to say who it is, but we've got three. So we're underway there. And of course, overall, against the 250 gifts we need, we've now secured 40, 50, whatever. You see what I mean? They're all
Yeah,
markers that other people are stepping up as well. And that will give confidence to your prospect to give as well.
great point. Great point. And finally, make sure you do your research, as we said at the start of this slide, understand where people are at, are they ready to be asked, and what you be discussing with them to make sure you're on the right page.
So it's about really building long-term relationships. And if there's anything to take away from today for you, just remember this: the people that give to you are the most likely to give to you again. So it's really, really important. So the adage as fundraisers, as we know, is givers give again. So spending rather than spending huge amounts of time trying to find new prospects and do all that research, steward your current donors like they are the most important people in your life, and it will bear fruit as your program unfolds. And here, in saying thank you, there are various examples set out of the ways in which you can build those long-term relationships. But as the same principles apply, however, the more personal you can do this, the more effective that will be. It's also recognizing that different types of givers have different motivations. So for the corporates, you can see it's very much around a public recognition. It's ways in which their gift can be acknowledged and be seen by their employees, their clients, their stakeholders effectively. Whereas a group, the trustees of the grant funders, the trusts and foundations, it's a personal note. It's that recognition of the impact their gift has had from your chief executive or your chair of your organization to their chair of their organization, personally thanking them for the not just the funding but the endorsement their grant would bring. And so you can see other examples there for legacies, and remembering there the motivations there are very much around immortality, the preservation and strengthening of the values behind your organization. And I should just say the crucial piece, you may think legacies can't give again. Well, actually, what can happen is people will make gifts whilst they're alive. They wake up to the fact that, you know what, I don't need this money sitting in my bank account earning diddly squat. What I'll do is give the money now. So thanking legacy givers when they declare their gifts in will is a great way to bring that on. Anyway, it's a really important step in the asking process is saying thank you to build those long-term relationships.
And it's particularly important if you do kind of have a major capital project that you're working on. I mean, how many times, Andrew, have we seen clients say, well, we had this campaign 10 years ago and we've been back to speak to so-and-so and he don't want to speak to us.
Mm.
And they've not communicated with these people for the last 5 years. Why they're not interested in giving them more money.
Yeah.
So that ongoing stewardship is so important.
It gives you the opportunity at the end of a pledge period as well, if you've been updating the prospect, is that you can then go back to them and say, well, would you like to continue your pledge payments, but now direct it to something fresh?
Absolutely. And don't be afraid to be creative with your thanking as well.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to go overboard and make that an onerous and expensive process. But things like we've seen schools do lovely stuff, haven't we, Andrew, where they've got some of the kids to write thank you cards and they've been sent to the donors. And it just has such an impact and really makes people feel special. So don't be afraid to think of something,
And
slightly more off-piste with your thanking as well.
And these smartphones that we've got now and their video, you can take a really, okay, it's not a professionally produced, but a really personal video note, visiting whatever it is the donor has funded, getting them to and saying thank you to them, and just nice and short and brief, and email that through. It's a wonderful way to start a week, and it's very, very personal.
No, absolutely. I always talk about this, but I met somebody who worked for an animal charity once, and they did exactly that. They got the park rangers to film at the park closest to where the group of donors would be. And they'd be like, good morning, Janet. I'm here at the
Yeah.
park, and these ducks are thriving thanks to your gift. And they had great results from it. Their attrition rates fell off. So it can be really just simple, creative things that make a difference, can't it?
It really can.
Okay.
So we've got some case studies, Amy. Whoa.
Now, clients, when they see this in training sessions with us, get horrified and think we're going to make them role play. But and sometimes we do. It depends how game they are for it. But we often just talk them through, don't we, Andrew? So
We do.
the first one here, one of the objections you may face in the asking process, I already give to the charity. So you're meeting with a potential giver to the campaign who already makes a monthly gift of £100 to the charity. You believe they have the capacity to give an additional larger gift to the campaign, but when you ask for that gift, they appear affronted and say, I already give generously. Can't we just count that gift as my gift to the campaign?
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow, that's not uncommon. I mean, it is really important though, that there's an understanding between the regular giving and when you've got a capital campaign coming along. So to me, if this came up, it would highlight the need to really restate the case, to make it clear that yes, we've got to run the charity and your gift is so powerful and helpful in doing that, but we felt that you would want to be part of this opportunity to create this new building or project. And that requires an additional special gift. And and also, we wouldn't want to offend you by not coming to you first to see whether or not you would be interested. But thank you for your regular gift, but you need to sort of restate the case for the capital campaign.
And it's also why the preparation element is so important, isn't it? Because if you've done that properly, going into that meeting that they already give you £100 a month, and you could open by saying, I first of all want to thank you for your ongoing support. that you give us on a monthly basis, and then move into, but this is an additional. So you can maybe even overcome that before the objections even raised.
I'd have a little look at too at the way the information events are being conducted. I'd assume this prospect has been invited to what we call an information event, and there's more discussed about that, by the way, in the first webinar on this subject. But we've got a chance to speak to a group, a relatively small group, very often about the new project, and you want to make sure in the narrative there, I think, Amy, that you're acknowledging the support that regular givers bring to enable the charity to operate. And now this is a special moment. That distinction I think could be drawn out in the information event narrative as well.
Definitely. It's part of that preparation, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. Case study B.
Ooh. I have other charitable commitments at this time. So true. I mean, so often the sheep. I have this view of the people being sheep and goats. There are, so to speak, there are the sheep who are givers. They just will give even if they've only got tuppence halfpenny in their pocket. Well, guess what? It'll be made into a gift. And there are others who just it's not in their DNA. They're just not givers. And being a lazy fundraiser as I am, I always encourage the teams I work with to focus on the sheep. When you recognize someone's a goat, thank them for being a goat, but focus your energy on the sheep. So here we've got a live situation that I have this is a definite sheep talking to us here, Amy.
Yeah.
And they're a retired person known to be comfortably well off, and they give generously to various good causes in the area. You're hopeful of securing a significant gift here of 50K. But the key point here is it's a similar level to your own. This is an example of a peer-to-peer ask. When you broach the subject with them, the response you get is, I agree that this is a worthwhile project, but I just can't give now. In addition to our support for other charities with 3 grandchildren, with paying their school fees, I'm relieved when the youngest granddaughter finishes her schooling in a couple of years' time. Key marker there. So where would you go with this, Amy?
So this is where the joy of the pledge period comes in, isn't it?
Yeah.
My first suggestion might be, absolutely understand. First of all, you acknowledge where they're at, of course.
Yes.
Absolutely understand, and I understand the pressures of, paying those school fees. Might you consider starting your pledge when your current commitments expire? So that could be one way to do it. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Legacy giving potentially as well, thinking about a commitment for the future.
Yeah.
Okay, for a capital project, that's more challenging because you never know when that gift might arrive. But
Thankfully.
obviously they do bring such surety, don't they, to
Yeah.
organizations as they're going through their financial planning for the coming years.
Well, I think that where I'd start is obviously saying the thank you, but also talking to them about, is this, regardless of the commitments you've got presently, is this something you would like to support?
Mm.
Is this, does this float your boat? Are you interested? Would you really like to join me and be part of this? And if the answer is yes, I would, but I can't see with these current commitments how I could do that, then you can move the conversation on, as you were saying, Amy, to say, well, look, we've got a pledge period. You don't have to start now, but maybe the first pledge payment could be in 2 or 3 years' time once your youngest granddaughter finishes her schooling, and then you could build out how to give over time using tax, etc., to join you in making a gift of this level. The other point I'd want to be thinking about and talking clearly with the prospect about is around recognition. And I don't mean necessarily of them, but if the project could relate to the family, which is clearly a big part of this prospect's, life and purpose, how can recognition play there? And be trying to think creatively through those opportunities. Yeah, it's a good one though. You've definitely got a sheep there.
Yeah. So finally, case study C, and there's more of these in the book for people to
Oh,
work through. We're
yeah.
just going through a few here.
Mm.
And this is a common one. There's no need to meet, just send me the information. So after an information event, you're following up with your prospects. They indicated they'd like to make a gift to the campaign, but when you try to arrange that meeting, they say, I don't need to meet with you. Send me the forms in the post and I'll fill them in. See this a lot, don't we, Andrew?
Yeah, I've got a special rainy Sunday inbox there full of forms, bits of admin that I should get done, and I'll do when there's less interesting,
Yeah.
things to do. And frankly, it's understandable though, because many people close to the organization, they may be board members, key members of the team, um, know everything. They don't want it. They've been to your event. They know what to do. They just want the paperwork filled out, and they're trying to save you time. But actually, remember what I said. They, during your conversation with them, 70% of they're working out how much to give, even your board members. So it's important you say, no, it's important, I'd like to come and see you personally, even if it's 15 minutes of your time. Can we get a slot in the diary? Because I need to get the paperwork right. I need to get it done now. And I want to make sure I've captured your wishes clearly on the gift form. And to talk you through the tax benefits and the pledging so that you properly understand how that can relate to your circumstances. May I please have an appointment? Go for the face to face and don't post the forms.
I actually think this is probably one of the hardest to overcome,
Yeah, it
because
is.
the others are always once you're in the meeting, and once you're in the meeting, you've got them there face to
Yeah,
face, you're talking to them about the project. It's getting that first step, isn't it? So this
it
can
is.
actually be more challenging for a lot of people, and we do understand why it's difficult because you don't want to feel really pushy, do you? But you really do try and need to get that face to face.
But also it gives you a chance when if there's someone already on the team, so to speak, to talk about other prospects, to try and convert them to become ambassadors for the campaign, to help open the doors to others, to maybe even host an information event. If you don't have, you just send the forms, you've got no opportunity to have that conversation.
Yeah,
So it's not just about the gift.
absolutely. Okay. Bringing
Ooh.
leadership on the journey. And we've just had a question in the Q&A about leadership. So we'll come to that question, Ali, after this slide, but it kind of links in. Do you want to kick us off, Andrew?
Yeah, but leadership is, well, we've experienced over decades of running campaigns, is probably the single most important factor. I mean, I'm going to go out, and I said this, I think, at the last webinar, is if we go into a campaign and we find every member of the governing body is making a gift proportionate to their means, it's not necessarily the biggest gift on the scale of giving, but you get 100% adoption early on. I will almost go out and put a bet on the fact that campaign is going to get to target.
Yeah.
Over 40 years of doing this nearly, that you can almost guarantee it's going to get to target. If we're still having a debate at the leadership level about whether or not they should be giving or not because they give their time and da, 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 well, guess what? That's just spinning the wheels, and we'll spend more time and energy losing momentum whilst we settle the leadership question. And if we don't, then I equally go out and place a bet we won't get to the target. So you need
So
to.
sometimes I've pitched this before, Andrew, and said, I don't care if you give £1 a month, you've just got to make a gift. And then they go, okay, I'll give you £1 a month.
Not,
That's
yeah.
fine. It's fine. They've made a commitment.
Well, Chris and I talked about this last time. We had a campaign in London. We were approaching a big US foundation for a big capital grant. The very first question they asked the client was, how many board members have made their own personal gift? Fortunately, we'd done the work and they were able to say yes, they had all made a gift. But it took the artistic director to put £10 in for one of the other
Yeah.
directors for us to be able to get there. But it was, and one of them had made a seven-figure gift even. So it's the collective leadership response that's so important. And yeah, so, but finding the first point here about bringing leadership to this particular journey is to find a champion, someone who can lead the way, really. So getting the first board member to make their gift, and then having them say at the board meeting, join me, come on, we've all got to be in this if we're going to make this work, is really, really powerful. It's much better than you nagging people to make gifts if you've got champions there, really sort of being an encourager for others. Yeah. So the next point is building confidence with easy wins. So there are, the prospects that are most likely to give, as Amy was saying earlier, are the ones you should approach first, because that then enables you to build the story out. So when you're presenting the scale, as I've explained, you can say, we've already got these gifts in. Do you see what I mean? So you build a positive momentum by getting that confidence up and talking about those easy wins.
Definitely.
You need to support the whole process with good quality prospect profiles and other information. So, if you're going to spend the time writing up and I stress highly confidential paper for the key leaders doing the approaches, so they are aware of the background and what your expectations are in a particular approach, is absolutely vital and time well spent. And I've seen some fantastic prospect profiles over the years, some of them quite humorous as well, um, which is good. And as Amy said, building out your frequently asked questions, that's what FAQs are. So that's a good, useful crib sheet, gives everyone confidence. And you need to keep updating your FAQ sheets as the campaign moves along, because new questions will be coming in, and it helps build confidence amongst your team of ambassadors. Crucially, my view is information events drive a capital campaign, and if they're not being diaried, if they're not happening, the campaign is dying. So, and if they are going in the diary and you're building and running those events, you've got more and more prospects being approached, that you're on a positive trajectory to win your campaign. So use your information events and really focus your attention on getting that mechanic working. Sometimes too, if you've got nervous askers, get them to buddy up. So two of them together might go and make an approach. And it's a great way for your more nervous askers to get more confident. And eventually they can leave the nest and make their approach on their own. But buddied up askers are a good format. And sometimes it really gets the list moving, rather than having them staring at no progress again between meetings. But the crucial piece is the development office itself, and I appreciate a number of you here today are development professionals. You need to exude efficiency. You need to show you build momentum by responding promptly, that you're efficient in dealing with the inquiries, that you're being proactive in your communications. It takes hard work. That's the old analogy of the duck, or the swan, I should say. You're looking very calm above the waterline and paddling really hard below the waterline. But it is that impression that will encourage the volunteer askers to step up, because they can see they're going to be well supported.
It's so important, isn't it, that they have that trust in you, that everything is being dealt with behind the scenes, and all I need to do is go and ask this person.
Exactly.
Person X is going to do everything else for me. That's all I need to do. Because time is often a big concern, isn't it, for people on leadership teams and volunteer boards who are asking for money, that I'm not going to have the time to do all this. And it's our job as fundraisers to really make sure they've got everything they need to make those asks properly.
Mm.
So let's go on to some questions. So we've got one in the Q&A, and this is a really good question, and we've both been there, Andrew. If a fundraising committee has been set up without a giving expectation, is it possible to change tack and ask even for small amounts? Great question.
I think you've got to deal with each member of the committee on a one-on-one basis in resetting the expectation. If you don't have written terms of reference for that committee, you might think about bringing them in and using that as a device to reset that expectation. It's not like the Americans, though, Amy. I mean, I wouldn't be saying that you need to, make a gift. It was a give, get, or get off. I mean, give a gift and go get gifts, or get off the committee. I wouldn't go quite that hard, but it's a fundraising committee. It's there to raise money. So we know leadership's the top priority. So yeah, that'd be my first thoughts, Amy.
Yeah, and I think it's just explaining to him, isn't it, as well, about that importance of leadership by example, and
Mm.
how powerful that can be going forwards in your fundraising campaign. So is it challenging? Yes, I think when that expectation has not been set, it is more challenging, but it's certainly not insurmountable to turn that around.
And it may be that point made earlier that you need to get one member of that committee to step up and make a gift. So who's the most likely one, when you reflect on the members of the committee, to step up and make a gift, or they may have already made a gift? And if that's the case, work with them to to share with the rest of the committee, have them say, come on, guys, I think we all need to be in this.
Mm.
Do you see what I mean? And then that makes your job as a professional much easier. Anyway, just a thought there.
Well, currently that's the only question in the Q&A. So
Gosh, we must have been good.
we must have. I'll see if there's any more pop up while we're just giving our closing comments. But as Andrew mentioned at the start, if you email Julie, if you want a copy of the Gifted Asking book, there's Julie's details and she'll get that in the post to you. And all our resources are on our website there, the previous webinars, and this one will be in the next couple of days as well.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much everyone for joining us. We are just in time. Yeah, 6 minutes to spare. Any closing comments, Andrew?
Well, no, thank you, Amy. I mean, it's been great to do these two webinars. I've been the consistent voice across both of them. I had Chris Goldie with us last time, and now you, Amy. Thank you. It is at the core of being a successful development manager or an outstanding trustee is how do you go about engaging others and encouraging them to join you in making gifts to your organization. It's an art, not a science. Okay, there's no right answers. But hopefully today we've given you the framework so that you can approach it confidently and not fear that you're going to lose your friends or upset people. And quite the contrary, if you do this well, it really motivates people and they get a lot of joy and satisfaction in making the gifts that they always wanted to make to a well-run organization like yours. So thanks for giving us some time on your Tuesday. It's been lovely to be with you all.
Thank you. Have a great day, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.
Bye.